I don't think we can blame any white person now currently for anything we've done in the past. I think white guilt is obviously wrong in the context of, well, I blame you for slavery in the 21st century. I do think, though, there should be some guilt amongst white people for the persistence of white supremacy as the overwhelming system. I think that is what we should focus on. Is that I don't want you to feel guilty for slavery. I want you to feel guilty that this has persisted for so long without us doing anything radical about it and changing that capitalistic white supremacist
I don't
system.
think guilt is a very productive emotion. You know,
Well,
people have very little control over broader social circumstances like that. Even, I mean, even the president can't, just single-handedly wrest culture one direction or another.
nobody can. Sorry.
Oh, well, yeah, no, I mean, nobody can. Even getting people on board with big cultural shifts like that can take a ton of time. And, I mean, people disagree on a lot of these issues. There are white people who are fully anti-racist and white people who most certainly are not. There are black people who are completely fine with the system that we live in today, and black people who certainly are not. I don't know. I don't feel like anyone, as a part of their race, should feel more or less responsible for these systems, only for their own behavior, because at the end of the day, that's all you can really control.
I disagree completely because I think when a system has been built for you, I think and built to benefit you over others, you have a responsibility to dismantle it, and that is through collective action, stepping back, not centering yourself in groups that wish to dismantle that system, and supporting them as like allies. And that absolutely you can change on an individual behavioral level. I mean, you might not be able to do much about the system as an individual, but when you obviously collectivize, you can do something about it. I think that's what's most important is that you can oppose that system that benefits you 100%.
Yeah, sure. But I don't think that has to be a guilt thing. You can just make a moral
Oh,
argument for it. You can just say, yeah,
I
I think people, but I would say that to black people too. See, again, I wouldn't distinguish here if you're a beneficiary of the system. If a black person is not contributing appropriately to the, the fight against white supremacy, I think you're just as right to call them out for it, as if a white person wasn't.
but isn't that just being complicit in the system that benefits you? I mean, unless you're actively and constantly attempting to subvert it and dismantle it, you are complicit in it, and you may
Same for the black
agree.
person.
Well, yeah, but I think the modus operandi is on the white ruling class who have all. I don't think you could expect the same amount of.
Sure you
I mean,
can.
I think that there should be, but I can understand why someone who's absolutely devastated by poverty in an inner-city community, who's black, who has the compounding factor not of class but also of race, might not have the same tools to fight the system in the same way that someone who has benefited from the system, who is likely upper middle class, can in the
But
same
it's not
way.
about
And
the
you can use their
tools.
privilege to destroy it. It is about the tools, though.
No, it's
If
it's
you
about
cannot,
moral. It's about the like the ideology that you're criticizing.
no, I completely
No, it is
disagree because
you. A
the
utilitarian
tool.
framework is acceptable when we're talking about people's behaviors and actions and such. And
Mhm.
obviously, if you're going to choose targets on who you should, like if there's one guy you can push to like be anti-racist, and you have the choice between Jeff Bezos and some 70-year-old black guy in Detroit, like obviously you should make the right choice. You should make the utilitarian choice there, power and the tools they can use. But when we're criticizing people ideologically, like when we're saying, the moral culpability, the harm of the ideology itself, I think that's like a fairly level playing field. Now, so if we're talking like activism, like action, like changing things, then of course you should direct your time towards trying to win over the most powerful people, the wealthy, the white, so on, because those people have the greatest ability to affect change. But when we're talking about like whether it's wrong or not as like a principled like ideological thing, I can say maybe a black person being complicit in white supremacy doesn't contribute as much harm, but it is
Right.
as bad of them to be that as a white person. And interpersonally, if I knew a
Yeah.
white person, a black person who were both um, disinterested in these kinds of issues, I would hold them both negatively to that.
Oh, I totally agree. I have no sympathy for, I think, people of color who reject class consciousness or to some degree, like, promote capitalism. Of course, I'm not, I always reference the Fred Hampton quote where it's, we need solidarity. We don't need black capitalism. We need socialism
Yeah.
as an ideology. Absolutely. But I don't think that changes the fact that white people hold, and this is like poor to a lesser degree, of course, but also just in general, those upper middle class, rich, have the power to change the system in so many meaningful ways that I think black people just don't have access to in many ways, short of violent revolution, of course.
I don't know if I agree with that. That feels like what is that? What do they call that? Black pessimism. I don't know if I agree with that position. Still, it's not always about what you can actually do to change things. It's about the ideology you hold. Ideology, it spreads person to person, system to system.
Mhm.
I think it's
Yeah.
important for everyone to feel on board. You want everyone to participate in the dissemination of an ideology. I don't think it makes much sense to like interpersonally weigh it, or to go like, okay, well, I think white people should feel guilty for being complicit. I think that trying to push for, you can call it race blindness if you want, but I unironically do think it's better for the dissemination of an ideology to do so in a race blind manner. If something's good, it should be good for everyone. If you're making a moral argument, that moral argument applies to everyone. You do nothing but divide the movement and create culture war bickering.
I don't know because I think, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's fine.
I was gonna say that I don't materially, black working class people and white working class people have different needs simply because the way that they've been treated along racial lines is not the same, even though they're part of the same class. So I think I definitely disagree with that.
Well, they may have different needs in terms of what racial problems they need amended, but if you're
Right.
making a moral argument for an ideology, that applies to both of them.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm not talking about moral. I think I'm just talking about material. In many cases, but morally, I completely agree when it comes to ideology that we should hold everyone to the same standard of black liberation and leftism and class consciousness.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, I think all this is cut down with, Whitey's the devil, white people should feel guilty for X or Y. Oh, when a black person shoots a white guy, says fuck Whitey, it's prejudice, not racism. I think all this stuff really weighs down the conversation in ways that can make it really, really difficult for people to get on board with fighting against these systems. And as much as we don't want to be complicit, we will obviously need to word our arguments in a way that most people will be receptive to. Otherwise, we have no chance
Yeah.
in affecting any of these changes.
Right, right, and I like the thing I want most, I think, is to get all of those blue collar Trump voters from like Pennsylvania, the post industrial Rust Belt to understand that they have more in common with someone who's poor and black than they do with Trump, who's the epitome of capitalist greed. And the best way to do that, I understand, is like through making connections when it comes to how class affects both. But I think without the understanding of, oh, racially, I have power over this person under the system, that leads to an unequal outcome.
Yeah, you're never going to get them on that, ever. You're never going to get them on that.
But it's true.
No, it
But
doesn't
it's
matter
true.
it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. That's
How do you?
irrelevant, in fact. The last thing, if you want to bring those people over, the last thing you want to do is make them feel like they're wrong for having not already agreed with you. When you bring in all this guilt weight, all this, my bias affects me, this or that, no one's going to convert to an ideology where there's original sin attached, which is exactly what lefties talk about when they talk about checking their privilege, this, that, the other. The goal is to reframe an existing moral position they hold. And most people, even conservatives, are anti-racism in their minds. Their definition of racism and what is and isn't racist is super warped. Yeah. So they're anti-racist because they think we already live in a meritocracy.
Right. Exactly.
So
exactly.
critical race theory is racist, but like white people running the show at the Fortune 500 is just because our culture is better. In their mind, that's meritocracy. But if you challenge that with this, like, oh, you're culpable, the weight of your privilege bears upon you, you must take extra burden to compensate for, they'll never get on board with that. You just have to try to rewire their existing biases and frustrations in a way that makes them more aligned with our own, you know? So
I agree.
Yeah,
100%.
and that's really difficult to do. It's also nearly impossible to do on race issues. The best way to
Right.
do it is through class issues, because
Right.
most people in America have this bereaved sense of, you know, like they're being fucked over by some group of powerful people.
Right.
It's just for conservatives, it's like Hollywood and the liberal elite.
And the you know, Nancy Pelosi's fucking them over as opposed to, you know, the system of the system
Exactly,
itself.
yeah. So historically, that's been the most effective vector by which people can be moved over. Better that than them being moved over by, I don't know, the Jewish question, which is the other
Right.
big direction people go when they're told that a group of powerful elites control their lives. But that's the approach that I think works best, you know, and that's why I think there's been so much friction between liberal academic types and I guess what I'd like kind of jokingly call the silent majority in America, because these people are not respected outside their academic groups, you know?